We're delighted you could all join us and to be joined by some excellent guest speakers. My name is Wakani and I'm the Bright Now campaign officer here at Operation Noah. Operation Noah has a strong history of encouraging churches to consider how their assets impact on the urgent climate crisis, with a big emphasis on divestment from fossil fuels. And as we continue this work in the coming months, we'll be building more focus on investment in clean alternatives. So before we begin, I have a quick note of housekeeping. So you should all be on mute. This is set up as a Zoom webinar, which means that you can only see the panelists when we're speaking. And a brief structure about the webinar. We will welcome our speakers today, but we'll start off with the authors of the report who will share some highlights from the report and then proceed to our guest speakers. We've got a really great lineup, so really looking forward to their presentations. We'll save all the Q&A to the end. And if you have any questions, please send them in the Q&A box, which you'll find at the bottom of your Zoom screen just there. If there are any questions that catch your eye and you think you'd really like to hear an answer to those, you can click on the little thumbs up or like button and that will vote them up so we see them. Please direct any of your questions to specific speakers where possible. We'll also be posting on social media, particularly on Twitter, using the hashtag #ChurchInvestment. So again, that's now shared in the chat for you to use, and we'll also share relevant links in the chat throughout the event. We are recording the session, but only the speakers will be visible, so you have no need to worry and you can continue having your dinner if that's what you're up to. Right, so we're about to begin, and I would like to start by welcoming James Buchanan and Julia Cochran, the authors of our new report. James is the Bright Now campaign director and has been working for Operation Noah for over 6 years now. Julia is the Bright Now campaign manager, having started with Operation Noah in January 2022. Together, they have authored the report and they will unpack all of those details for us now. Thank you.
Thank you, Bakani, and thanks so much to everyone who's joined this webinar this evening. It's great to see so many of you here. So I'm going to start by just giving a very brief overview from our perspective at Operation Noah on, why has Operation Noah started focusing more on this issue on investment in climate solutions. Well, I think many of you will be familiar with our work on fossil fuel divestment, and now most UK churches have divested from fossil fuel companies. But it's really important as well that they consider how they can invest for positive change in the world. And we know that investment in climate solutions such as renewable energy needs to scale up rapidly if we're going to have any chance of limiting global heating to 1.5 degrees. Some UK churches, and we'll hear about some of them this evening, are already taking a lead in this area, but there's definitely much further to go. And we hope that this report will provide inspiration and practical steps for faith investors and for campaigners to engage on this crucial issue. So over to Julia.
So these are just some of the key areas that we focus on in the report. There are a few more that James will explain at the end, and these are what we're going to look at this evening. But to start off with, we're looking at the church and the climate conflict and the cost of living crises. So there is clear evidence of the climate crisis. And in this report, we talk about examples that demonstrate this, and we focus on the impact around the world, particularly to the world's poorest, despite them having done the least to cause it. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change report said that 3.6 billion people are living in a situation where they are highly vulnerable to the impacts of climate change. It is a current crisis. On top of the climate crisis, we also have an energy crisis, which has been worsened by the war in Ukraine. And according to the International Institute for Sustainable Development, if the world redirects the $570 billion annually planned new oil and gas investments towards renewables This could fully finance wind and solar energy expansion in line with the 1.5-degree targets of the Paris Agreement. So for greater energy security, we need an increase in renewable energy, as well as investments in better energy infrastructure, such as energy storage projects. Churches can lead the way in investments and use their voice prophetically.
So I'm going to unmute myself. The next section of the report looks at the climate science and increasing urgency of action. And the IPCC report, which Julia mentioned, that was published in the spring of 2022, highlighted that immediate and deep emission reductions are needed across all sectors, as I said, if we are to have any chance of limiting global heating to 1.5 degrees. The IPCC report showed that transformation is needed in the systems that provide our energy, industry, transport, buildings, agriculture, and land use. The scientific warnings, as we're hearing, are stark. A major study published in September this year highlighted that the world is at the brink of multiple tipping points. The UN Environment Programme warned ahead of COP27 that credible policies from governments to limit global heating are not in place, and current policies would lead to a 2.8 degree Celsius rise in global average temperatures, which would lead to further potentially unstoppable warming. Yet, as the Lancet Countdown said recently, urgent action with a rapid shift to clean energy and energy efficiency could save the lives of millions of people. Inga Anderson, Executive Director of the UN Environment Programme, said, "It's a tall and some would say impossible order to reform the global economy and almost halve greenhouse gas emissions by 2030, but we must try. Every fraction of a degree matters, to vulnerable communities, to species and ecosystems, and to every one of us."
So in our report, we look at 4 reasons why churches should be investing in climate solutions. So the first is caring for creation. So we acknowledge that the earth belongs to God, and we're called to be responsible for the stewardship of God's creation. Unfortunately, in the last few hundred years, God's creation has been exploited, and we need to reverse this destruction. Part of the way churches can do this is by making sure their investments align with the values of the church. Our second reason is the loving of our neighbour. The climate crisis, as I've already said, is affecting people in the poorest countries the most. In the gospel, Jesus calls us to love our neighbour, and he talks about the Good Samaritan and the need to help others. So we must bring about a just change for those who are worst affected. Our third reason is acting with hope. So the world has many injustices, and yet we are called to have hope in God, and that God can use our small actions to bring transformative change. The hope we have is reason for bold action. And investments as a prophetic action. So it is important for churches to have an investment policy that matches with their values, because churches should be holding their investments to a higher standard. Churches should be leading the way in making radical change.
Okay, so the next section looks at fossil fuel divestment and investment in a fair and fast transition. And in recent years, the fossil fuel divestment movement has grown rapidly, and the assets under management of divesting institutions have risen to more than $40 trillion, so a really huge sum. Of the 1,550 institutions globally that have divested from fossil fuel companies, more than 160 are faith institutions in the UK. So UK faith institutions and churches have played a really key role in this. We're at the stage now where most UK churches have completed divestment from fossil fuel companies, and an increasing number of investment management companies are offering fossil-free funds in response to demand from faith institutions and other clients. Yet, the ethical investment process does not end with divestment. Churches and other faith institutions also need to consider the positive difference they wish to make in the world with their investments. As they have in the fossil fuel divestment movement, churches can shift markets and change public attitudes during this crucial decade when the world must halve greenhouse gas emissions. Some churches are leading the way on investment in climate solutions, including Quakers in Britain, church commissioners, the Church of Ireland, and the Diocese of Truro, all of which are included as case studies in this report. And we'll be hearing more about the Diocese of Truro and the Church of Ireland later. Many faith institutions are also taking important steps to increase the energy efficiency of their buildings, including the Diocese of Oxford, which announced that it would invest £10 million to improve the carbon footprint of its vicarages and better care for its clergy. So the next section of the report is focusing on the climate solutions and opportunities that exist for investment. And the first one the report looks at is renewable energy. And in recent years, we've seen rapid developments and cost reductions for renewable energy, which is now cheaper than fossil fuels in most, if not all, parts of the world. The cost of wind and solar power has been falling at a rate of nearly 10% a year. And in August this year, offshore wind in the UK was nine times cheaper than fossil gas, according to Carbon Brief. A recent study found that switching to renewables could save the world as much as £10.2 trillion by 2050. And as Carbon Tracker has said, renewable energy can also be deployed far more quickly than new fossil fuel projects. Faith institutions can also play a vital role in increasing energy access for the 770 million people around the world without access to electricity. And while investment in renewable energy access in the global south may generate lower financial returns than in wealthier countries, it also has a much greater social impact.
Energy storage. As we know, especially in the UK, renewable energy depends on weather conditions. Investment in energy storage will help to mitigate this and will provide flexibility at times of peak demand. Investment in energy storage technology will accelerate the decarbonisation of the electric grid. Bloomberg New Energy Finance has said that the 2020s will be the energy storage decade. UK government has estimated that technology like battery storage systems could save the UK energy system up to £40 billion by 2050, which would also reduce our energy bills.
So the next section looks at buildings and energy efficiency, and investment in these areas also needs to increase rapidly. The International Energy Agency has highlighted the need for a massive effort to speed up retrofits and spending on energy efficient buildings. And energy efficiency brings other benefits too. Saving a unit of energy is on average 5 times cheaper than buying it.
So for public transport is responsible for 15% of overall greenhouse gas emissions. Without mitigation actions, these emissions could grow by 65% by 2050, whilst action to reduce transport emissions could instead cut these emissions by 68% in the same period. When electric vehicles are powered by solar energy, emission reductions can be high as 95%.
So now we're on to clean cook stoves, which are an important solution in both tackling global poverty as well as reducing greenhouse gas emissions. Around the world, 2.8 billion people still lack access to clean cooking fuels and technologies. Indoor air pollution from cooking with solid fuels such as wood and charcoal has significant health impacts, and especially on women and young children, causing about 4.3 million premature deaths each year. But today, a wide range of highly efficient cooking stoves exist and can reduce emissions by up to 90%. At this stage, clean cook stoves are primarily accessible for investors through what are known as impact first investments, in which investors focus on generating impact above making a financial return.
So land use and sustainable forestry. So agriculture, forestry and other land use makes a significant contribution to the climate crisis, 22% of greenhouse gas emissions. It can also be a significant carbon sink, which currently returns 26% of human-caused emissions to Earth. You may have seen recently an Operation Noah report. It's our recent report from September, and we lay out 3 key areas, including tree growing, peat protection and restoration, and supporting farmers to reduce emissions. Changes in these areas can have a quick and big impact using fairly low cost or technology that already exists. Sustainable forestry is an important climate solution when done well, and you'll hear more about this in the Church Commissioners case study.
Okay, so this is a graphic that appears in the report, and it's been adapted from a graphic from Find Impact Foundation, which is also working on this area of looking at how faith investors can increase investment in climate solutions. In this graphic, you can see different sectors, different types of climate solutions in order of investability. And what we mean by that is an increasing number of investment opportunities, and also, I guess, where financial returns can also increasingly be made as well. So here you can see a few of the different types of climate solutions that we've already talked about. It's also fair to say that even those that are on the left-hand side here, such as transportation, public transport, and buildings, there are some investment opportunities in these areas as well, but perhaps the greatest number of opportunities are on the right-hand side of this graphic. Also, just to mention another kind of key point that's in this section of the report, which is around investment in a fair and fast transition. Faith investors have a really key role to play in ensuring a fair and fast transition that also recognises the importance of economic, gender and racial justice. No one should be left behind in this transition. For a just transition to take place, underlying social injustices need to be addressed in order to avoid replicating the same systems of resource and human exploitation. The climate solutions that are presented in this section of the report, it's not an exhaustive list, and it's probably also important to say that not everything that's presented sometimes as a climate solution is a good solution. So we wouldn't necessarily recommend investment in biomass or in carbon capture and storage, for example. But as this report shows, there are various climate solutions in which churches and faith institutions can invest, and these need investment to be scaled up rapidly if we're going to truly address the climate crisis.
So in the report, we talk about a few case studies, but tonight we're going to speak about three in particular. So the first is the Quakers. So the Quakers was the first UK church to divest from fossil fuel companies in 2013. Over 18% of their portfolio is invested in companies that are responding to the climate emergency. Between December 2020 and December 21, the market value of the Quakers in Britain's investments increased from £28.9 million to £33 million. They credit their investment in renewable energy as part of the reason for their positive returns.
Another case study which we outline in the report is the Church Commissioners, one of the three Church of England national investing bodies. And at the end of 2020, the Church Commissioners had £630 million invested in climate solutions, which included investments in renewable energy, energy efficiency technology, electric vehicle charging infrastructure, and sustainable forestry. The sustainable forestry investments account for over £500 million, or 5% of the Church Commissioners' overall portfolio.
Salisbury Cathedral. In December 2019, Salisbury Cathedral invested £25,000 into the Salisbury Community Energy. This led to the installation of solar panels in 7 sites, including the cathedral cloisters. This was part of an initiative for community energy.
Okay, and then there's some other sections of the report which we're not going to really elaborate on just now, but just really to mention these briefly. These sections, I would say, are especially useful for faith investors, but also for campaigners that are interested in just learning more. And it includes how to respond to common investment concerns, key steps on the climate solutions investment journey, and also some key resources and useful links that you can look at to find more information. So just to summarize, we believe at Operation Noah that now is a time for churches and faith institutions to take a more strategic and intentional approach to increase investment in climate solutions, to do so more proactively and to communicate good practice so as to inspire other faith institutions, the investment community and wider society. So thank you very much. Please do get in touch with us to find out more and to get involved in the campaign, and looking forward to your questions later on.
Thank you very much to Julia and James. And as James mentioned there, please pop any questions that you have in the Q&A box just at the bottom of your screens. And we'll look forward to taking all those after we've heard from our guest speakers as well. All right, let us now welcome our guest speakers, all of whom have been involved in this area and have helped shape the report. Our first guest speaker is Lorna Gold, Director of Movement Building at Faith Invest and Chair of the Laudato Si movement. Faith Invest supports faith organizations to invest in line with their values to achieve a just and sustainable world. They support religious groups and faith-based asset owners in developing faith-consistent investing policies, acting as a bridge between religious investors and the wider financial world. Lorna has more than 2 decades experience of engaging faith groups on environmental, climate, and economic justice. Thanks for joining us, Lorna. Welcome.
Thanks, Bokani. I'm absolutely delighted to be here tonight with you all to help to launch this important report. And I want to, first of all, congratulate Operation Noah and James and Julia in particular on such an important step forward in outlining the steps that the church is taking and could take to support climate actions. Huge congratulations, and I hope that this report reaches the audience, the global audience that it needs to reach in the coming months. I'm really delighted to be here, especially after the conclusion of COP27. I'm sure that many of you will agree that this COP didn't differ very much from previous COPs. Whilst we don't like to call things failures, if you define a failure as falling short of the necessary steps to address how we carve out a path to a safe future for our children, I think we can all agree that it fell far short. It was a failure. Whilst the loss and damage mechanism that was set up is being hailed as a success, as my good friend Yeb Sanyo said at the conclusion of the COP, it's a loss and damage mechanism is pretty useless unless the emissions are on a path of decline. It's like turning off, it really doesn't get us anywhere unless we are reducing the emissions significantly at the same time as addressing loss and damage. And as we know, as things stand, and as is outlined in this report, the world is very much still on track for a climate disaster. We haven't shifted the main aspects of our economic action, our economic model, significantly. And governments have still not committed to putting into action the rapid transition that is now required. So it's wonderful that we're here this evening to talk about hope and leadership, about concrete steps that churches and people of faith are taking to move towards investing in a sustainable future, a livable future. And why is this so important right now? I believe that for people of faith, it's unthinkable that at this stage in the climate crisis, that our faith institutions would be investing in climate disasters. It's not okay. Investing in the status quo is actually investing in climate disaster. And it's madness that after decades of scientific knowledge about the climate crisis and our other ecological limits, that the investment world and the regulatory environment which shapes it and frames it is still unable or struggling to embrace fully the reality of climate emissions reductions and global heating. There are various mechanisms, mostly voluntary, to support this transition to a low carbon future, particularly the regulation on non-financial disclosure. But the way that the investment world is structured makes it almost impossible for investors to know exactly how investments are being made and the impact they are having. And this is why so many institutions, faith institutions, have adopted primarily a negative screening approach, a divestment approach to their investments as a means of tackling the climate crisis. At least when you divest, and it's a very important step, you're applying the ethical principle of do no harm. And that obviously is already a start, a move in the right direction. However, a negative approach, as this report outlines, is nowhere near enough. It's selling the faiths short, selling ourselves short, because faiths with the rich traditions and deep understanding of the nature of money can do so much more to support the emergence of a new economy. I would say it's our moral duty to do so. Because it's not like those solutions do not exist. If we were having this report or this webinar even 10 years ago, it would be quite difficult to point to the solutions and their investability and their scalability. But that is no longer the case. There are clear choices, and our choices of how we invest, how we make good choices, how we can choose to invest in what is good, sustainable, regenerative, circular, will shape the decade to come. So it's essential, in my view, that faith organisations, which control trillions of dollars in assets across the world, across all asset classes, double down on their efforts to support intentionally the emergence of a low carbon, just transition, whilst decisively exiting from the old. Faiths need to apply a whole portfolio approach to how they deal with the questions of climate change and a livable future. Investment can take many forms, as this report outlines. It can involve joining forces with others and co-creating new impact funds with the stated intention of supporting the emergence of a regenerative economy. It can also involve supporting the many existing initiatives on the market. Significant funds specialising in sectors which are germane to a faith approach. It can also mean shifting the focus of investments to more local initiatives in which you have the great joy of witnessing the direct impact that the financial investment is having. Many faiths have invested locally, investing in watching forests grow, witnessing the rewilding of land, benefiting from the renewable energy installations, all shifting and supporting the emergence of the new. Faith Invest, the organisation I work for, exists to support faith groups, as James said, to align investments according to their values for the benefit of people and planet. We work closely with Operation Noah, the Laudato Si movement, and many others to find ways in which we can conscientise the faithful on this issue and co-create solutions which the faith investors so badly need. Often the journey of aligning investments, of becoming more consistent with our deepest values, involves a re-examination or an examination almost of our consciences. to see what those faith values are saying to us and recommitting to them in a new way, fitting for the times we're living in. It also involves understanding better which parts of the investment process necessarily have to be outhoused and which have to be in-housed. All too often, faiths have outsourced not only the implementation of investment decisions to consultants and intermediaries, but the actual working out of the values and the mandates themselves. So we work closely with individual faith asset owners, supporting them through this process of internalising their investment decisions through one-on-one engagement, which starts with re-looking at how investment policies and strategies help to deliver the social and environmental mission. We accompany the faiths on this journey to put our investments to work in a consistent way with the big vision of a just and sustainable world. As we call it in the Christian world, the kingdom of God. Now is the time to put the kingdom back at the centre of our investment decisions in a bold and prophetic way. It is eminently doable, but we must be mindful that our investments are not just for today or tomorrow, but for eternity. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lorna. That was a very rich presentation. I'm sure we'll have plenty of questions as well to follow that up, so really appreciate it. Next, we have Mike Sturgis. Mike is the chair of the Diocesan Board of Finance in the Diocese of Truro. In our report, the Diocese of Truro is included as an example of how a Church of England diocese is already responding responding by investing in climate solutions. So over to you, Mike, and welcome.
Thank you very much. I'll share my screen if I may. There we go. And thank you and welcome everybody. So this is going to be a story of a journey. It's the journey that we took in the Diocese of Truro from picking up on Lorna's point, first doing no harm, divesting from fossil fuel, but then secondly, doing good. It is a story, it is not investment advice. I hope that goes without saying, but we will be talking about specific investment decisions, but that's a regulated activity and I'm not authorised to give it. So you'll see in a couple of slides, there's a disclaimer on there. Just please note that one, as they say. So as we come on to our journey then, we started with the diocese coming up with a creation care strategy with 3 pillars. The first one to cherish creation, the second to cut carbon, and then to speak up. So if we're looking at those 3 structures, every committee and sort of grouping within the diocese was asked how to come up with the objectives to meet those 3 particular objectives there. And in particular, obviously, we were looking at the requirement to try and get to net zero by 2030. And so each committee sent in their targets, and we then looked at those, we challenged some, and then we brought them together as the whole diocesan strategy. And we'll see the investment committee key objectives in a moment. Our journey started back in 2020. We invested £1 million. We decided to invest it in infrastructure. And this wasn't particularly about investing in renewables. It was more about looking at the portfolio we had and doing some diversification there. We were treating infrastructure as a substitute for bonds. And when you think of what happened to the bond market recently, we're really glad that we put it into infrastructure instead. So the 3 funds were there, one of which was purely on renewables. We tend to get most of our money to invest from sale of glebe land, so we hold quite a bit of lands, and we will look for opportunities to use that and increase value. And so we had another amount to invest in 2021, and we continue to invest in infrastructure funds. This is the first time we have actually invested directly. All the other times we have used fund managers. So we're now starting to invest directly. We still use fund managers, of course. And I said all three of these were in renewables. So by now we were into onshore and offshore wind, solar panels, hydro, and battery storage. So as I said, this is all driven by our strategy and our objectives from the investment committee. So let's just briefly look at those. So our first one was do no harm and disinvest from fossil fuel extraction, which we did in 2021. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. And then we started to invest in renewables. We are also starting to work with our fund managers to calculate the portfolio's carbon footprint. Some of our fund managers are much better than others at doing that, but the aim being that we will look to track that carbon footprint over time. Hopefully we'll be seeing it coming down. As a diocese, we invest in mission, and we've got the net zero. And the way we do that, the way we release money from that, is through the total return mechanism. And so we started doing sort of 10-year projections as to what we think we are going to need to meet our objectives. And we're then looking at the sources of money coming into our investments to see whether we need to reshape our portfolio to allow us to draw down those monies. We haven't started this yet, but part of our objectives will be to start discussing the impact of biodiversity from our investments. There's not much point in improving cutting carbon if we mess up the environment while we're doing it, or the biodiversity while we're doing it. And in line with the main objective of cherish creation, cut carbon, speak up, we take opportunities like this to tell people about what we're doing and encourage others to do the same. And we've done press releases and web articles and so on. So that's the main investment strategies that we've got. So if we look at that first one of disinvesting from fossil fuel extraction, we started with a portfolio which was CCLA, and CCLA at that stage had already said they don't invest in fossil fuel extraction. So that was a tick from that point of view. And we've been talking to our other fund manager, M&G, and they were talking about bringing together a fossil-free alternative. Then coronavirus kicked in and everything went a little bit pear-shaped in the market. And they came back and said, actually, we're not going to do that. We're going to continue with engaging with people to try and help them to transition across. And we said, well, that's great, but that doesn't fit in with our objective. So we sold their entire holding in M&G. We told them why we were doing it. And we went to look for another fund manager. And we interviewed Saracens in Cazenove. So we looked at the Saracen Climate Active Endowment Fund, in Cazenove Responsible Multi-Asset Fund. And both of these had very strong ESG, environmental, social, and governance credentials. We actually liked them both. We couldn't really choose between them. So we sold a few more of our investments from CCLA, and we put together a 10 million fund and put 5 million in each of these. And so that on the right-hand side is our new approach. Now, as we were talking about presenting here, we looked at this and said, well, okay, how much of our portfolio is now actively reinvested in renewable projects? And before I did the calculations, I would have guessed it was something like about 5%. But as we went through and calculated it and took the renewable aspects of each of the funds that we've got, we actually came up with a number of 9.5%. If we had included the little bit of nuclear that we have in Saracens, a little bit of investment in nuclear there, that would have probably taken it to 9.75%. We had an investment committee meeting last week, and we looked at this number because it actually surprised me how high it was, and we were still comfortable with that. I think our view is we probably wouldn't want to push it above 10% because we still need a balanced portfolio. And within the others, there are other solutions that are useful. So we've done a lot of work within the diocese to do affordable housing schemes using our land. We've mapped our glebe land against the national grid to try and see if there's opportunities for new, where we can connect to the grid for either new renewable projects of our own or using the land for battery storage or things like that. So we're still working other assets quite well. But that, if you like, is the short journey that we've had. It's been quite exciting getting there, and we can pick up any questions you may have when we get to that stage. So thank you very much, and over back to you. Can you stop sharing for me, please?
Hold on. Thank you so much, Mike, and that was so helpful and great to have so much detail as well. Our next speaker is John O'Shaughnessy. John is Chief Financial and Investment Officer of the Franciscan Sisters of Mary, a Roman Catholic congregation of women religious in St. Louis in the USA. During his 30 years with the sisters, he has served as a financial advisor to several other Catholic congregations. John helped start the Catholic Impact Investing Collaborative, a good partner of Operation Noah, in 2014, and is a board member and a treasurer of Laudato Si movement, another good partner of Operation Noah. So you're very welcome. Thanks, John.
Hi, everybody. Good day. I'm going to share my screen now, and I hope you can see it. I'll be working from this. Congratulations to everybody at Operation Noah for this wonderful report. Can't wait to dig into it. And thanks for the summary. So I was furnished some questions to help guide what I would share today, and I'm grateful for those. And the first one was, why did FSM start investing for impact? Now, we started this about 10 years ago, and what we discovered, first off, is that we could make investments that had impact that would generate market rate returns. And for us, that was important. We needed to be able to support our needs of the community. And we could also, in doing so, lower our overall investment program risk. So that all sounded good. But really, the compelling thing was that we discovered we could do mission with our resource. This resource of investable capital, we could do the mission of the Franciscan Sisters of Mary. And if you know the sisters, you know that it's all about mission for them. So the mission of the Franciscan Sisters of Mary is to be the presence of the loving, serving, compassionate, healing Jesus. Now they went further to say the focus of the mission is on compassionate care of creation in collaboration with others. So with this focus, it really helped me as the person that oversees the investments to have something to really work with. And this compassionate care of creation. But collaboration would be a vital part of what we did for ourselves and what we did with the Catholic Impact Investing Collaborative. Give you an idea of how things moved for us with these investments. We started about 10 years ago. We started gradually making these investments. If we were to update this as of today, we're almost at the top of the graph, about $11.5 million in these investments. And I will add that these are private investments. Now, private investments are quite a bit different from publicly traded stocks and bonds. One thing is, stock and bond, you can go on the market any day and liquidate your holdings or any one holding on any trading day. That's not the case with private investments. They tend to take their longer term commitments. Your money is tied up, but the value of that is that you can be more specific and directive and move into areas that you have a particular interest that you want to be supporting and investing your money in. So that's the upside of private investments. So we're moving forward to the end of 2021. I can show you where this private portfolio is allocated. First among investment themes, clean energy being one, and that's a bit of a broad umbrella of investments. And then the rest of it, 39% across a number of different things. These are things you heard about what Julie and James were talking about some of the areas of opportunity for investments: food and ag, waste management, sustainable transport, and so on. Now, asset class, private investments is an asset class unto itself, but within that, there are subcategories like private equity. You think about startup companies, might be venture, might be those that are growing rapidly. Real assets is a separate category of private. And you think of real assets, think of those that have projects or companies that have underlying tangible physical assets. So farmland, could be ag farmland. It could be solar and wind farms. It could be, timberlands and so forth. And then private credit, think in terms of private loans and that sort of thing. The nice thing, we really like this portfolio. Aside from the impacts, we like the portfolio because it gives us a much greater degree of diversification. For example, in the first half of this year, our portfolio here has generated a return of 3.5%. Now that's compared to other investments we have in the stock and bonds markets that are down double digit through that same period of time. So it gives us diversification, which we really do love. As far as where we're invested geographically, most is in the US, some in Latin America of that 70%, but most in the US. But we made a conscious decision to want to invest, particularly in developing renewables in emerging market countries. And then a bit of a sliver in developed Europe and Asia. And then I would finish up here just to give you a sense of the kinds of fund managers that we have. Now, I should mention that we've only made a few, very few investments in direct investments. That would be like in individual companies. Most of what we invest in the private sector, private investments, is in funds. So a fund manager will invest in a number of different companies or spread loans across different companies or projects. And this is a few of those that we work with. If you want to get a sense a bit more about what we do, you can go online at fsmonline.org. It's a couple of years out of date, but you get a good, even more information about the kinds of investments that we have been making over these years. And then just a very sliver sampling of the sorts of things that they would be investing in. One is converting waste, feedstock waste, into usable fuels. Another one, and agriculture being such a terrible, industrial agriculture being such an enormous emitter of fossil fuels, we really love the idea of investing, and we have in organic regenerative farms. Hey, did you know that radishes are a fantastic cover crop for lots of reasons? And then investing, one can invest responsibly in sustainable timber and forestry, conservation forestry. Don't have to clear cut a forest in order to harvest. You can do it in a responsible way. And we've done quite a bit of clean energy, renewable investments. This is one. MCOPA Solar is one that is beneficial, improves quality of life for people in countries in Eastern Africa where they offer their products and services. So that's just a bit of a snapshot of what FSM is about, what it's been doing in terms of our private impact investments. And our sisters just love it. It's a way that we can live our mission in whatever resource we have. It's usually been the sisters working in their ministries, doing the work with their hands. But hey, we're an aging community, and we found a way to do it through our accumulated savings and how we've invested those savings. Just a few words about the Catholic Impact Investing Collaborative, something that I helped start. And I'm thinking back to 2014. Now, first of all, Catholic institutions, particularly in the United States, have done an excellent job in social responsible investing, whether it be avoiding certain investments or engaging with shareholder engagement and advocacy, voting our proxies. But when we at FSM discovered we could do those things and more, and this kind of impact investing, mission-driven investing, it was like, wow, it's like seeing this landscape and just being in awe of the possibilities of it. And so back then, 8 years ago, it was like, who else is seeing what we're seeing? And so several people were drawn to this idea. Let's talk about this. What's going on? What can we share? So what Seek became at the very early stages was a community to share our learnings. And then sort of a community of practice as well that moved into follow-up meetings, including in different parts of the US, sharing our stories, sharing relatable stories of how different groups have gone about moving into these kinds of investments. And then it's sort of gradually moved beyond that to where we developed a Catholic Impact Investing Pledge to really sort of catalyze, give people an opportunity to say, yes, we want to do this. And then where we are today, which is a bit more advanced, to provide means for Catholic investors to make these kinds of private investments. We have an online platform that all the deals are sourced by other Catholic asset owners, so they can sort of pick and choose and see what others, their peers, have invested in or really like, shared pitch, group pitch sessions, and so on. So, so I would finish by saying, Seek is also about, there are a lot of passionate people that are investment professionals. Those are with financial intermediaries, and they have been absolutely critical to what Seek has become, because their hearts are in it as well, and they were really passionate about it. So the co-founder of Seek is one of those people, Jake Barnett. So I think with that, I'll finish up, and I'm grateful to be here and to be with you all.
Thanks so much, John. Really great to hear your experience with both the sisters and with Seek as well. We'll now hear from Stephen True, who is member of the Church of Ireland General Synod and a campaigner. He spearheaded the successful campaign that saw the Church of Ireland complete its divestment from companies that extract fossil fuels last year, and has also been involved in encouraging the Church of Ireland to invest in climate solutions. So over to you, Stephen. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Kenny. It really is a privilege to share with everyone here around the world this webinar. First of all, I just want to say that I am simply a passionate parishioner who has called for change. And it is a real privilege to be able to share with you how the Church of Ireland has transformed its investment strategy in recent years. The Church of Ireland's representative church body, or the RCB, has completed full divestment, as you said, from fossil fuel extraction companies at the end of 2021, which moved 50 million euro out of these fossil fuel companies and into clean funds instead. And this, the RCB has really transformed its investment strategy over these years. And it's increasingly focusing on investing in climate solutions. Just a couple of examples of what they've done. They invest in sustainably managed forestry here in Ireland, and also an Irish property fund that is aiming to be operationally net zero by 2030, as well as actually building net zero constructions buildings by that time as well. And then globally, it's investing in infrastructure funds, such as ones that improve electrification across the Americas for transport, electric buses, that kind of thing, and also in electric transmission in India. And this change in the investment strategy has had really quite profound impact across the whole church. The RCB has developed a cultural change themselves in their own operations. They decided to try to reduce the amount of travel that they do, to reduce their waste, to save energy in their own buildings, and to invest in little biodiversity projects. But this has not only transformed that the RCB itself, but that cultural change has seeped right across the church, across the island of Ireland, so that there's now a greater emphasis on climate solution projects or green projects in mission. And so this comes to, I think, what can the church do next? And churches need to look at the land that they have and to use it wisely. To improve, for example, the biodiversity of your green spaces or graveyards or little gardens and around your churchyards. To reduce energy uses in church buildings. To consider planting trees on church land, and also to increasingly see green spaces and improving our communities' access to those green spaces as part of mission, to connect with our communities through the use of caring for creation, as we've already heard about. I think as well, churches need to reconsider engagement. Often in the past, we talked about divestment and not engagement. But what I'm talking about is not engagement with fossil fuel companies, but actually engagement with banks. Churches, we all use banks and insurers. And what we need to do is engage with our bankers and our insurers and ask them to stop funding fossil fuel finance as well. They are really part of the solution, and the church has the influence in terms of who they do banking with, but even more so of calling the banks that they actually do with to end the financing of climate chaos. And just also in the light of what Maya Motley called for at COP27 just there in Egypt, churches can engage with our politicians and call for a permanent windfall tax on fossil fuel companies that will help to pay for the loss and damage that we're seeing from the climate catastrophes that we see, for example, in Pakistan or in the Horn of Africa, with the desperate starvation that is imminent there because of the endless drought. So there are real changes in Ireland. It's been the divestment has led to a cultural change almost in seeing how we can do mission better, as well as we can invest in climate solutions. So thank you for the chance, and I'll be very happy to answer any questions that you might put in the chat.
Thank you so much, Stephen, and thank you to all our speakers this evening. So really brilliant to hear tangible actions that are being taken across so many different churches and all around the world. We are now going to move on to our Q&A section for the evening, and thank you again for all those who've asked questions and popped them in the Q&A section on your screen there. I will start with a question. Perhaps this is a little bit easy because, you know, working here at Operation Noah, I've seen a question asking, why did Operation Noah decide to shift from a focus on divestment to one on investment? Perhaps, James, you may like to start with that.
Thank you, Bokani. Yeah, happy to answer that. I think probably the first thing I would say is that Operation Noah, we haven't abandoned our campaigning on fossil fuel divestment. We'll be continuing to campaign for the Church of England and the Catholic Church in England and Wales, other church denominations that haven't yet divested to divest from fossil fuel companies. And especially, for example, in the Church of England, 2023 will be a really, really key year on fossil fuel divestment. So watch this space for more around that. But I think it's also important to say that for us at Operation Noah, divestment from fossil fuel companies and investment in climate solutions have always been two sides of the same coin, because we need to, as Lorna said, not only stop investing in harmful industries and the in the companies that are contributing most to the climate crisis, but we also, if we want to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, we need to be investing in the solutions to the climate crisis. We need to be investing in, many of the things that our speakers have been talking about this evening. Renewable energy. We need to be investing in reducing the emissions from food and agriculture, for example, as well, and many other sectors. So for us, it's almost a sort of like natural progression. And we're obviously now at a point where most UK churches have divested. And so I think it's also natural that, faith institutions are on a journey here, and as I said earlier on, the ethical investment process doesn't end with divestment. It's an important step, but there's so much more to do, and so we really hope that this report will inspire churches, faith investors, and hopefully campaigners as well to encourage their churches to take action on these issues.
Thanks, James. And you mentioned Lorna, so I'll go to Lorna next. How do you think the outcomes of COP27 affect the need for faith investment in climate solutions? And also, what good things came out of the COP, do you think, that we can build on? Thanks for your very honest response about this latest COP.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I didn't want to take away, apologies if I took away from all the enormous work that goes into COPs, and having been heavily involved in quite a few of them myself, I know that it's not for a lack of goodwill often, especially on the part of many civil servants and people, especially a lot of NGOs, a lot of campaigners. But I mean, I would stand by my comment that if you count a failure as failing to reach the necessary conclusions to prevent the climate breakdown within the next decade, it's hard to see how this was a success, frankly, despite all the goodwill. And I guess one of the positives that often comes out of COPs is the building of movements, the building of networks. And this year, that wasn't quite the same as well, because of the prohibitive costs of being in the place and the repressive political environment, which made it difficult to protest. The 600 fossil fuel lobbyists on delegations. To me, it's just the whole process loses credibility when the very industries that are many of which have been proven to be bad actors in the climate space are pretty much able to heavily influence decision making. The idea that we have moved from a clean energy and a focus on renewables to something that's called low emissions energy in the final decision beggars belief. Many climate scientists see that as a retrograde step that takes us pre-Paris. So anyway, I don't want to labour that point, but I think that wasn't it Einstein that defined madness? I was repeating the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. And if you look at how emissions have increased through 27 COPs, I'm not suggesting we abandon them, but the focus of the faiths in particular and the investment world has to be on scalability and the changing the culture as Stephen so fantastically put it, and Mike, the initiatives that what struck me about Mike's intervention is the detail, the attention and care. Care for creation is in the choice of every one of those funds. It really struck me. It's not something that's left to chance. It's not something that's left to somebody external, working with external partners, as John pointed out, but taking the time and the discernment and to not leave it to chance. And faiths can do it. Faiths can do this. And imagine if every faith institution, every diocese, every temple, mosque, faith group was doing what is being talked about tonight. And I have hope that that can happen. I think this cultural shift is what is necessary.
Thanks so much, Lorna. And I think a big part of that cultural shift comes from campaigners and the actions that campaigners take and the pressure that campaigners put to counter those bad actors, and also to put pressure on both governments and businesses. And so I want to ask Mike and Stephen about any advice that you might give to campaigners in encouraging their churches to invest in climate solutions, and really in engaging with church investors, as you've done. Any key lessons that you learned from your experiences?
Shall I go first, Stephen? I think it really helps if the people who are involved in the decisions, the bishops, people like me, the chair of the investment, are actually passionate as well. Because I think one of the issues is do people see it as a conflict? I need to, if I do good, I won't make as much money. And so there is a real fear there that investing in renewables will not produce a sort of return. I'm absolutely delighted to say that is the opposite of what we found. We have invested in renewables. 3 of our 6 infrastructure companies have actually increased in value since December last year, where everything else has been going down by, almost double digits. And so that's really great, but we rely a lot on income. I mean, most churches, most charities require a steady income stream. Typically, you're getting 3% from a portfolio. Our renewables are often based on projects that have got long lives, with a contract in place, often index linked, and we were making 6%, 6 to 7%, that sort of range, 5, 6, 7% of those. So we're getting more income. They've actually increased in value during this time where others are going down, and they're just a good part of a balanced portfolio. Now, in fairness, if we were in a really strong bull market and equities were going up like mad, these guys would underperform. But they're a nice balance within a portfolio. And I think to get to the people, you just need to tell the stories. You need to point to the sort of stories that we've been hearing today. I think it was yesterday I saw, was it York Cathedral has just put 199 solar panels on their roof. And we put solar panels on my church's roof in 2012, but we had to do it in the middle where they couldn't be seen from the ground. Sounds like we might at long last be getting away from that. And I think it's beautiful to have a listed building with solar panels on it. I mean, talk about what it's statement of our faith. I saw a picture of one in the States where the solar panels were in the shape of a cross. Wow, amazing. Just go for it. So just tell stories and point to the people who've done it and the results that are coming out of it. It does not affect, it doesn't negatively affect your bottom line. In fact, it's probably a really good investment, subject to my caveat earlier on about not giving investment advice.
Yeah, I would agree with Mike. Church of Ireland, the divestment journey didn't negatively impact investment returns. In fact, it was the opposite. So from the experience of those who've done it, I think there's the answer. In terms of how you can encourage your church to take these steps, I would suggest that you be prophetic. You're biblical. You're a biblical basis to this. This is about the kingdom of God. It's about loving your neighbor, and so on, as Jesus called us to do. And it's speaking the truth as well. And if we speak the truth to believers in terms of we don't want to do harm. We don't want to be investing in destruction, which is very clear now. You know, it's not just campaigners who are saying this, it's actually every country in the world. As we just saw at COP there, they don't want to continue down a path that is leading to, you know, climate hell, as the Antonio Guterres said. And so we can respond to that by speaking the truth prophetically, which sometimes means doing it again and again and again, using all the means of communication possible locally, at your national church level, through writing letters, through your church newspapers and things like that. Be prophetic and tell the truth. So that's and be biblical. I think that's a foundational thing. We're talking about the church's mission here, and how we invest in funds to help support our churches, but to do it ethically, and so on, that furthers God's kingdom here on earth.
Thank you, Stephen. And John, you also mentioned working to mission and work both to support, using resources to support mission practically, but also that investment process as part of mission. So I wanted to ask you this question about how you've worked with your financial managers, and well, you are, you know, they're working for you, as I often try and encourage other congregations to remember that you are their client and they are there to serve you. Somebody has said that their financial advisor says it's really hard to drill down to really green funds as regulation is not yet good enough. How can we be sure that eco-credentials are being believed? And essentially, how can we work better with our investment managers to align with our values?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's best in anything in life, the more informed you are, the better you are to converse on it. There are advisors who are quite candid and perhaps, but yet may not be fully informed about what opportunities there are and whether they are considered truly suitable, appropriate for a client. And in some cases that is out of sort of selective thinking. But I think, Mike, you said it right, and I've said it in my presentation, that what we're seeing here are quality investments. These are investments that can improve one's overall risk return profile. That is, over a course of a period of time, you could increase your returns and you can smooth out your returns, like what we're seeing this year. Mike had that experience, so did we. We have positive returns from the investments we're speaking of, whereas generally the markets are down. So I think another approach would be to connect with others that have this same interest, because you learn more from and that's kind of what Seek is about. And I know that's what other groups that have a similar kind of community of practice are about, is learning from others and reading some of those stories that are posted on Seek's website or others, good examples of what groups have done. So I think it's really worth one's time to put in to do a little bit of search and research on the subject. But I know I'm always available. Anyone at Seek is always available to our staff to talk about these very things. So I would go as far to say, any of us here, those that really are passionate about this, would love to have conversations with those that are delving into questions like this and sort of facing hurdles that they find difficult to overcome. If there are ways of doing it, there are most certainly ways of doing that are quite acceptable and and as a prudent investor.
And I would agree, before we chose our infrastructure, we started with about a dozen, and we did quite a bit of due diligence. We delved into them as much as we could. You're right, some of them were really quite opaque, and we just didn't go with them. And we picked the ones we said, okay, we're pretty certain about what's in here and how we're going to do. And I think our second tranche, where we just went to the renewables, I'm much more comfortable than those, and than the couple which are large fund infrastructure funds with lots of different projects within them, because that's more difficult to understand exactly what it is you're investing in.
Great, I think we've got time for just a couple more questions. So for the panel, I'll prepare you. The first will be, what steps from the investment side, what first steps can asset owners take? I know there'll be some people listening who think, great, this sounds wonderful, and I'd like for them to come away from this, ready to send that first email to their committee or whatever it is that you think should be that first step that they take. And also from the campaign side, so if you're a campaigner, what is the first step that you can take? But before we go there, I'll ask Julia what you thought is one key message that as the authors of this report, you wanted people to come away with.
Thanks, Gary. So I think the key message is the need for an increased investment in climate solutions, and how we need action on this now. And as part of that, investment is a journey. So churches need to get started on that journey. It doesn't have to be like putting all your investments in it immediately. It's just getting started. And I think this kind of reflects a bit what just Stephen was talking about the need for the church to be prophetic. And as we outline in our section about the church and investments in climate solutions, it's kind of what Christians we are called to do, and it's part of living out the gospel as Jesus calls us to do.
Wonderful, thank you. That's really, really helpful. All right, so we'll start with Stephen. What do you think that first step campaigners should take?
Yeah, that's a terrific question, actually. I would say the first thing is to try and identify who the decision makers are, and then build up a relationship with them. That'd be the first thing I would suggest.
Wonderful, thank you. I'll come to James last, maybe, and Mike. From the investor side, what do you think that first step should take from an asset owner?
If you're actually in the investing committee, then I think you need to be pushing, if you're not already doing it, to have a policy in place which actively addresses disinvestment and then moves on to the investment. There's a question in here, I was just typing an answer up actually, about somebody with minimal financial experience asking, what do we do? It's probably the one we're looking at. And I think we contact the relevant body, whether it's church, diocese, it could be your parish church as well, and say, do you have an investment policy? Does it specifically refer to disinvestment from fossil fuels? If it doesn't, is that a deliberate decision to continue investing? Or have you just not got around to thinking about it? And then move on to the same question about reinvesting and directing your investment money and funds into what is actually the mission for the church. Because the young children, the young people are really passionate about this. And they, if they know that you're passionate about it as well, you've got a real connection there.
Thank you. And Lorna, from a movement side, you've had this overview. What are your thoughts? What steps can leaders take? Oh, you're muted, Lorna.
Yeah, I'm really struck by Stephen's comments on culture change and leadership change. And I think that really is at the heart of this. So it's really about thinking how that culture shift could happen within whatever institution that you are connected with. So whether that's your diocese, whether it's your religious order, your group, your movement, whatever that group is that has investments, think through what is the culture shift that needs to happen. and then create the moments for that to happen with those people. I'm very struck, and this might seem a bit like promotion for the Laudato Si movement, but recently we showed the film The Letter at the Operation Noah, where many people were with us, at a conference we had on faith investments in London just a month ago. And there were from some fairly significant major faith asset owners in the room. And one of them, after seeing this film, which talks about a dialogue, the reality of climate injustice, and the need for profound change, urgent change, and the responsibility, one of those asset owners who has significant assets came up to me in tears and gave me a hug, because I'm actually in the film. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. But he said to me that he had never realized just how the reality of climate injustice and the reality of the situation. And it really struck me that somebody who's involved in this world of asset management for very, very significant faith institution could be just disconnected from the reality of what's happening. So creating moments like that, where you can come together as a faith community and challenge ourselves to understand what needs to happen and how that needs to be across the board. As Mike said, it has to be across the entire spectrum of our faith action. It has to become part of the mission, how we invest our resources. So that would be my suggestion.
It's really helpful, Mona. Thank you. And it was a brilliant film, so I'm really glad I got to see it, and congratulations to you. And I think John was also involved behind the scenes, maybe not as camera friendly, unfortunately, John. But I'll come to you for some of those, how you implemented this. What were some of the first steps you took? I know it's a while, you've been ahead of the curve on this for some time.
Yeah, well, this goes to that very question, I think. What the reason really ultimately, if you boil it down, the reason we started looking at this is because when we did our investment policy review, which we do every few years, we for once took a close look at sort of the piece of it that speaks to how are we doing mission, that we were going to do mission with our investments, we're going to focus on stewardship in the environment and on and on. And when I looked at it that way, I said, we're not doing this. It's in there, but we're not doing it. We're doing it along the margins. And so we decided we either had to do it or we had to change it to be, instead of window washing. So my suggestion is that everybody go back to their investment policy and see, where does it speak to living your Catholic values or your faith values, or living your mission, or these sorts of things. If it says it in there, then decide through evaluation, are you doing it? To me, that is, and what we discovered is the beauty of then through discovery that we could do this. We could actually do what it was telling us to do, but we hadn't really been doing for all these years.
Thank you so much, John. It is very important to walk that talk, absolutely. And James, I'll ask you for a very short response. Unfortunately,
so sort of first steps to take. Yeah, I think. I mean, I think Lorna said it really around the sort of the need for a culture shift, the need for an ecological conversion, and I think I'd just emphasize again the urgency of the climate crisis. And there's been a lot of discussion. We haven't really touched on it too much this evening, but around can we limit global heating to 1.5 degrees? And just reading in the Guardian in the last day or two, Damian Carrington describing it as a sort of it's still technically possible, but at the moment it seems like it might be a political impossibility. And I think part of our job as faith groups, as is to make it a possibility. And it might seem like a really, really tall order, as we said, but I think this is something where, you know, we've seen churches and faith institutions have had a huge impact in the global divestment movement, and have started to remove the social license from the fossil fuel industry as a result. And that's been the UN Environment Programme, and others have said that. But I think there's absolutely a need to look at, you know, how can churches lead the way? How can churches and faith institutions lead the way in scaling up these climate solutions, which urgently need investment, and I think they have a crucial role to play there. So I think really for faith investors, it's recognizing the urgency, and for campaigners, it's speaking up, making sure that the faith investors are hearing this, and that you're going to keep on asking them, and make sure that that this becomes a priority.
Thank you so much. I've been really inspired, as usual, by our speakers today, so I cannot thank you enough. And hopefully we've persuaded you that you want to go and download the report, read a bit more, and share it also within your communities. I very much believe in hope in action, and that faith coming from that real engagement in the world. Let me now hand back to Julia for a few concluding announcements.
Thanks, Bokani. So we've created a short form which is being posted in the chat box now, and we would be grateful if you would complete this, especially if you'd like to get involved in the campaign. And also, please do email me to find out how your church or faith institution can invest in climate solutions, or have further questions about our report. That should be in the chat. Thank you. Back to you, Bokani.
Thank you. And thank you to our team behind the scenes, our excellent speakers. Thank you for sharing your experiences. It really has been very inspiring. And as well as a thank you to everyone who helped bring this report to its final published stage. It is meant for sharing, it is meant for use, so please do go into the sections, especially with that step-by-step to guide you in getting going on this journey. And thank you again to everyone for joining us this evening, and goodbye.